All right. Yeah, Maka, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Good afternoon, Mav.
Yeah, good afternoon. Okay, so I'll just wait. Um, Let me know when I can kick off with the session.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll do that. If we can give 2 minutes, then we can start once it's 12:05.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so 12:05. Right. For those that have joined, I think you can actually drop a message in the chat. Let's see the engagement already.
Yeah. So if you're on this call now, please go ahead and drop a message on the Discord server telling them that the class has started, so we can kick off. Okay. So I believe. So Mav, I believe we can start now.
All right. Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much. So hi guys.
Okay.
Today we're going to be covering state management with Vue, and we'll specifically be looking at Vuex this afternoon. Yeah, and of course we have other state management tools, and I think the standard one, pretty much the standard right now is Piana, but we're going to be working with Vue today. So yeah, let me just go ahead and start off with the project setup. So that will be the flow for this session. We'll start off with the project setup. Would install and configure Vuex, and we'll just implement a simple counter state management operation, right? So when I mean counter operation, so just a very simple action that can increment or decrement a number, and we would also perform a network request, right? Probably fetch an item from the JSON placeholder and present that item that was fetched on the DOM, right? So that is pretty much what we'll be covering today. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, of course, is to install or to set up a new project, and this is the command I will be using right here. You can find this command on the Vue.js documentation websites. Right, so let me go ahead and do this right now. So npm, and I hope you can see my terminal very well. Let's see, is there any other command I can? Okay, so I need to take
I think
myself
this
off
is
that.
bold enough.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to increase the screen size. I think it's quite better now. Yeah. Okay, so guys, this is my terminal, and this is the command I will use to set up my new project. So now it's asking for the project name. So I'm going to simply call this view states sample, right? So it's asking if I want TypeScript. I'm just going to say no. Do I want JSX support? No. For the view router, okay, we don't necessarily need to use it, but I'm just going to say no. For the states management with Piana, no. Now I said this is the standard and this is the default that I pretty much would advise most people to use, but it's a great idea to also know how to use Vuex. I think in the next session we'll then look at piano. Okay, so I would also go with no and add vtest. Okay, we're not doing unit testing for now. If you have any questions regarding some of these things, feel free to reach out to me on Discord and we'll talk about them. But for the meantime, I'm still going to say no, and we are not doing end-to-end testing as well. Yeah, so let's go with no. So this is going to pretty much give us, our base, projects and file structure. So I would go into the view stakes sample, and I would just say npm install, which is the command we have here to first install the necessary dependencies before I would run the project with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so this is currently installing our dependencies, and that is complete. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is to say npm run dev, to run this. But before I do that, let me quickly open this up in VS Code. All right, so we have our project, we have VS Code open right now, and this is our project structure. Zoom in one time, okay? And right here, you can see we have our source directory. We have our assets, component, router, views. So I'm going to create a directory, but let's just execute this, just to see what we have, right? npm run dev. By the way, I am using Alacrity, for my terminal. If you probably, have some plans for trying it out, I feel it's probably the fastest I have used. So you can check it out. Let's click on this I think I'll just copy this. Let's go to our browser. Okay, so this is pretty much the entry screen to our view and Vite bundler, right? So let us go ahead and take off some of these default items here. We don't need them, okay? I'll just go to the app.view file and I'll pretty much take off everything we have here. Let's just start fresh. So I'm going to put in my templates, my scripts, okay, and of course, style. Okay, so we're just going to implement a simple UI, but I think we can basically just do, just to make sure everything is working. Hello world. Okay, so let's save that. All right, so hello world right here. Okay, so we have a bunch of styles in the assets folder, the base CSS. We don't need all this stuff. The main CSS file as well. I don't need all this as well. So I'm pretty much just going to delete these items here. Don't need them, right? And yeah, also save this file. So we pretty much just have, hello world. So it's quite plain for now, okay? Next, we are going to set up the Vuex. So we're going to set up Vuex store. What I will do is I will just install Vuex first with npm install Vuex, right? Okay, so while we have Vuex installed, I think it's currently installed, correct? Okay. The next thing I would want to do is to configure, Vuex right inside the main.js file here. Okay. Now we need to configure Vuex so that Vue would be able to communicate with our store our store file. Okay. So I'm going to create a directory. I would call this store. And within the store directory, I'll just create a single file index.js. Okay, so this is where we would have our store, and then I would explain some of the details that I believe you need to understand when it comes to working with Vuex. But before I do that, I would then just connect that store by simply importing store from. So I would just call the store directory there because this would basically point to the index.js, so we don't need to add this here, right? Let's just take that off, and I would also say .use store because we want this to be connected to our Vue instance, which is the app instance that we have here. All right. So let's navigate to the store, and now this is where I'll be doing most of the explanation because I think it's very important that you at least understand how some of these things work. So let's navigate to the Vuex, website. Right, so as you can see, it is telling us that Piana is now the new default, right? That does not mean you can no longer use Vuex. So if you're already using Vuex, I mean, it's still, supported, but it's a great idea to, learn Piana after understanding, Vuex, all right? So we'll definitely cover Vuex in the next section. All right, so let's see what we are going to be doing here. So some of the core concepts you need to understand about Vuex is this: states, getters, mutation, actions, and modules. All right. So when it comes to the state itself, just to clear up on some of these things, I really want you to listen. So the idea about working with state is that when you fetch some items or you create some items, you are able to reuse that particular value, the value contained in that state across your pages, without having to pass it through props. So I'm sure you know props. So there's something called there's a way to basically pass data through props into multiple components. But then you have this chunk of component tree that is passing props here and there. And trust me, apart from the fact that it can be confusing, or apart from the fact it can create a lot of conflict, um, it is not ideal, to always pass one item to the other before you are able to get what you need in that other, component. Instead, you are able to create a single source of truth, as you can see, right? And when you create a single source of truth, basically the data is stored in there, and every other component can interact, with this state, knowing very well that whatever I get from this state is what component B or component C would also get from that state. All right. So as you can see, the single state tree does not conflict with modularity, and it makes a lot of sense because you can easily access the value from the state and reuse it everywhere. Okay, so just to give you a fundamental explanation to that, if you want to visit this page, you can check out vuex.vuejs.org. All right, and it's a very wonderful way to communicate with items that you have kept in the store. All right. So the next thing you're seeing here is getters. So basically, if you're asking what exactly is a getter, right? Um, yeah. So a getter is basically a function that can be used to retrieve data, from the states in a computed, fashion. So the way it works is you are basically going to work with multiple sections, but just to give you a general idea about how it works, you create a getter and you use that getter, which is a function. You use that function to basically pick an item from the state, perform some manipulations that you want to perform on that state, and yeah, you are able to retrieve it, right? So using what we call, or using this function, right? Using this function. So I would show you an example, and I believe you would understand it better from the example. All right. So we also have mutations. Well, so what exactly is a mutation? A mutation is a function that will be responsible for changing the states in Vuex. So if you can use a mutation to change, the value of the state by performing some kind of computation. So let me click on that. So as you can see, we have a store right here, and now we have a state with a value of 1. With the mutation, such as the increment, this is a function basically, right? So when you call the increment, as you can see, it increases the value of the state, right? It says state.count plus plus, right? So state.count, of course, this is equals states. This is the same thing as state.count, equals state.count plus 1, right? So state.count plus plus is going to increment this by 1. If you say state.count minus minus, would decrement this by 1. So this is pretty much the example we're going to be trying out, right? If you use decrement, you can basically perform multiple operations using mutations, that will directly affect the states. All right. So a mutation is a function that is responsible for changing the states in Vuex. Okay. And the one thing you must also understand is that the mutation functions must be synchronous, and these are the kind of functions you can use to basically enforce your business logic right there on your front end application. All right. So finally, I think we have. Oh yeah, I don't think that's the last one. We have actions. Okay, so basically, actions are similar to mutations, and the major difference about working with actions is that instead of mutating the state, actions will commit the mutation. So just to explain what or how this would work, as you can see, we also it also says that actions can contain arbitrary asynchronous operations, such as network requests, right? Such as pulling down data from a specific source. So the idea is when you perform those network requests, you then use, from the action, you then have to, commit a mutation, and then the mutation will basically, pick up some data or value from, the action that was performed, and it will be stored inside, the state, right? So you don't call the state directly from the action, rather you call or you commit. It's called committing. So you commit the mutation while passing in that specific value, and then the mutation would reach out to the state and ensure everything is proper across um, your store, across the store. Okay, so I would also show you an example, but just to see what we have here, you see we have an action, and the action, which happens to be an increment action, is then referring to the context of commit increment, right? So when you call this action, it basically calls this mutation, and then the mutation would act on the on the count state. Now, on the count state, of course, you can have multiple state items. You can have like user, you can have count, you can have, probably maybe some API records that you're storing here, right? What I'm trying to say, in essence, is that, let's see if I can open Excalibur. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to say, in essence, here is that you can basically have multiple items within the, within the state. So you can have I think this is better off this. Okay, so you can have like users, right? You have an array of users you are expecting that can be stored in the state. You can have maybe products. If you're working on an e-commerce product, for example, you can have products, and that is also within the state. So within your actions, you can basically do things like fetch. So let's do this here. You can basically do things like um, fetch all products, for example, fetch all products, and yeah, so you can basically fetch all products. So within the fetch all products, you can of course make your actuals request, and when you get your response from actuals, you can then commit commit these items into a mutation, like maybe you call that get items. So you can commit these items into this result into a mutation, and the mutation would then update the value you have within the state. So we'll work on an example. I believe yeah, we'll do that shortly, and I hope you understood the point I was trying to give here with this simple demonstration. All right, so I think finally modules. So modules are just a way to basically group your state or your store into multiple. I think yeah, I am about to go back to the term module, but the idea is you're able to kind of like modularize the store um, the store your store into like multiple logical grouping, the way you group this. So you have like module A, it has its own states, it has its own mutations and actions. You have like the store, it has its own you have the module B, it has its own states, mutations and actions, and then you can create your store, and then put everything within modules. So at the end of the day, this is seen as a module item, this is seen as another module item, and of course you can basically uh, you can basically have this in different files and then put them together, just to show that this separates. You can have a state file for products, right? Products of JS. You can have a state file for maybe payments, right? And then at the end of the day, you can use modules to combine the items you have. So just like this. So I can basically move this away from here. I can have this inside the payments. I can move the items in module B, and I can have this inside products. So I'm going to delete some of these things, just a quick example. Yeah, so We're having these errors, of course, because of these items here. If I take them off, those errors are gone. So let's just leave that. So at the end of the day, you can basically just reference those modules, right? So we can bring in those modules after exporting them from here. We can import them in here, and this would just tell Vuex that okay, we have multiple modules for our store, and they all have like different logical things happening in there, and they all make up our store, right? As yeah, collectively. Okay, so we are not going to be doing that. But I hope you get the point. So module is basically a way to logically group, you know, uh, different sections in your store. So the idea is you basically we call them namespaces. So like module one or module two or module A or module B, you have different namespaces, and each of those namespace will be able to have its own state, mutation, action. But of course, you can basically access any of them from your Vue projects. Yeah, so that is basically yeah, that is basically it. Just a quick recap. The state itself, is kind of like your centralized data store in Vuex. The mutations is the functions that are responsible for changing the state in Vuex. The actions would be the functions that can be used to perform asynchronous tasks such as API requests, and we'll definitely show an example. And getters will be used. Getters are basically functions that will be used to retrieve, the data from the state, and the modules are, simply a way to organize your store into separate namespace, categories or modules. Okay, and yeah, let us go ahead and work on our example. I will start off by uh, creating our layout. So what I'm going to do is just going to be a simple layout, where I would have three buttons. One button will be used for increment, one will be used for decrement, or subtracting, and one last one will be used for making network requests. And yeah, I think that is all. That's all we need here. So let's go ahead and yeah, I'm just going to say we're going to basically have like a base class, because I always want to make sure things are wrapped up properly. And I'm going to have a different div right here. Let us move the H1 here. And the H1 will be the value, that will be incrementing and decrementing. So I can simply call that item, right? Let's add this code here. So I'm just going to, yeah, I'm just going to export defaults. Let's do this. And I'm going to have my data. So value, yeah, okay. So the value, this is just the default value I'm adding here. So return this value. And yeah, so I'm going to have like computed and methods, because we're going to import the states that we would create. For now, we don't have them yet. So, but let me just add the computed so that we can fetch, the states from here. Yeah, so I think this should work. We'll get back to this, and of course methods. Let's see. Okay. What am I missing here? All right, so we will get back to this. Let's come back to this guy, and let's add our style. I think we added style already. Let me just move the style right to the top. So we have container. Sorry about that. I need to mute my phone. Let's see. Where is it? 1 minute, guys. Okay. All right. So we're going to style the container. Yeah, let's just say we have display, reach, 20 items in the center with 100% and our height to 100 pH. Okay. What else are we missing here? What if we have text align? Okay, so yeah, so this is our container. And right here we have the div. So that div would basically have the H1. We'll also have a different div that will contain our buttons. So let's just create a button at click. So this specific button will be used to perform our increment operation, and it would always increment by 1. Right, so let's just say increments. I'm going to duplicate this, and I would have, well, let's just subtract. Okay. And yeah, let's just subtract by 1 as well. So let's call this decrement. Decrement. Yeah. All right, then the final button will be used to make our network request. So I'm just going to call this network requests. And we don't need to call this here because it's going to, the network request will be made, right inside our store, right? So let's just make network requests. So when we make the network request, we want to print out the items. So we're going to call JSON placeholder. And I'm simply going to say we have a div and a class of contents. And the data will be presented here, at least for now. Just a chunk of data will just appear here. Right. So yeah. So let's see. What do we do next? Let's go ahead and style the button. Just to make it look more appealing. I'm going to refresh this page. It seems like okay. Yeah. npm run dev. Let's run this again. So I'm going to style the button next. All right. Let's refresh this page. Okay, so basically there's something wrong right now. So I would have to check what is wrong. And I believe it's, oh yeah, we are calling some functions that we have not created. We'll fix that shortly. Yeah, we'll fix that shortly. Let's see. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'll basically, call some of these functions. So in order to do that from the script, I have to import a couple of things I will be using. So such as map actions. As you can see, it's already telling me that these items are coming from Vuex. Okay, so we'll also bring in map mutation. Map mutations. What else are we? Okay, yeah, then map states. Okay, so map states. Okay, so these are the 3 items we need to bring from Vuex. For this example. So now we have a return value of 1 already, and we are simply going to bring in, the map states, the state items. So we're going to create a state item we would call item and data. So if you look at this, you see we're working with data, and we're also working with item. We won't create that in our data section. We'll bring it straight from the store, right? So in order to grab items from the store, we're going to be using the map states, of course, because they are the state items. And we are going to bring in 2 state items. So let's put that in an array and let's call it item and data. All right. So these are the items we're bringing in from the state. Of course, we can have more items here, but this is what we're working with for now. And for the methods, you call the mutations right here because that is the method. So you can also call the actions here. So 1, 2, 3. Let's do the map mutations. And we're going to bring in some of those methods that we called. We don't have to create any method here. We call the increment, subtract, and the network request. So let's go ahead and let's call the increment. This would also be in an array, of course, right? So increments. What else? Subtract. Okay. And finally, I said we would have the action. The action, it will be used to make our network requests. That is not a mutation. That is an action. So we'll just say map action, and we would have the network, just to be very sure, network requests right there. Okay. Let's paste this in here, and now we have the map actions, calling the network request. So I think this is, it's time for us to simply dive into the state file and create some of these things. So let's go to the index page or the index file within the store. So this is where we are going to be creating, basically our Vuex, code. We're going to be adding our Vuex code in here. So let's start by importing the that create store. Vuex, and then we would have import actions. We're going to be working with actions from actions. So let's go ahead and install actions. Okay, let's come back here. Let's stop this for now. Actions is what we'll be using for network requests. So if you're working with an API, you basically want to make network requests, you can use actions. Let's run this again. So now we have actions installed, and we're going to simply create our store by saying export default create store, which is what we imported earlier. And we are now going to put in our states. So these are our states right here. We're also going to bring in our getters right here. And we're also going to bring in our mutations, right? Finally, we're going to bring in our actions. Right, so this is what we have. So inside the states, you have to bring in the item. Remember the data that we were looking out for here, item and data. Let's go back. So we have the item, and I'm just going to set the default value to 10. Just we can use that to test this. Then data by default is null because the data will be coming from the API request that we make. So for now, this is just null. Okay, so for the getters, we basically what we are going to track, we're going to basically track. Let's see. Okay, so what do we really need to track with the getter? Let's see. Okay. So we are going to be tracking a specific, like payload item. When we make a request, we want to be able to, commit that request, and we want to be able to, do some tracking. But that is not. Let me skip that for now. We'll definitely get back to tracking that request item, and I'll show you what I mean by that. For the mutation, we have our increment. Remember, I told you that these are the methods. So we have increment, subtract. Right? Yeah, we have increment. So we have the state, we have the payload. So the payload is let's see the payload. Okay, yeah, that's correct. So the payload is the item we'll be using to, like kind of like passing what was sent, from the UI here. So if we're sending like 5 or 6 or 10, this is the payload. Okay, that will be the payload. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to simply reference the state itself, and we'll say state.item, which is what we have in there, equals state.item plus the payload, right? Which means whatever we pass in the payload, if it's 5, it will add 10 to 5, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and do the same thing, but for this time, we'll do subtract. So this is your regular JavaScript, right? So the state is by default, the payload will carry like, an item. So we're also subtracting 1 from our example. So we'll say minus the payload, right? That is the only difference we have there. And the last mutation we would have, remember I told you when you make an action, request here, you're going to then commit that, using the mutation into the state. So we're going to have a get data, mutation, and of course, the state and the payload as well. Payload, all right. So we just say state.data, which is going to contain, the data, from the request we make, will be equals the payload. Okay, and finally we can just go ahead and create the action. So the action, remember, we called that network request. So let's copy that and let's paste it here. Okay, so I'm also going to say, for our network request, you always want to pass in the context. Of course, context here can basically be anything you prefer to use. I'm just going to work with context. So the context is going to be how you communicate with your mutation. All right. So I'm going to simply say let data equals await. Means this function has to be async, right? So let's await the actuals, not actuals error, but actuals dot gets. Okay, so I am going to navigate to this website called JSON placeholder. Okay, so to do's. So let's see. I think if I do slash to do's, this will give me why? I mean, this is supposed to. Oh, it's .com without the. Sorry about that. I was expecting it to give me the to do's right here. Correct. That's what I was expecting to have. So let's go back to our code, and we just want to get all those to do items. Okay. So by the time we get the results, that will be stored in the data, we want to simply say context.commit. This is how you commit to a specific mutation, which is get data, that we created, and then we're committing the data we get, dot data. So whenever this data is kind of like the object, so which means I can say results, and here I can simply say results dot data, right? So you must always pick, of course, based on the way the API works. I'm very sure we need to pick the data, in order to capture this object. Okay, so this is what our code looks like for now. We need to do some styling, more styling on that part. But let me go back to the app.js, and yeah, let us quickly do a little bit of styling here. So what I'm going to do is just to create, yeah, what I'm going to do is simply to create, okay, I'm going to say color white, background color black, okay, and color radius px and padding 15 px, and I hope that is not too much. 15, then I'll put 40 px so that the side will be wider. And I'm going to create a class I would call button flex. So I want all the buttons to be, let's see, yeah, class flex. So I'm going to use this. Let's see what we have. Okay. So I'm going to take off the border, none, right. The button flex will be display of flex, gap, 20 px, flex wrap, okay. So now we have increment. As you can see, this guy is literally calling, increments, right? Increment, we're adding 1. Let's change that to 2, 17, 19, 21. Let's change that to 10. So let's see, 1, 41, 51. Okay. Let's go back to this and let's try the subtract. So increment, you see, it's taking it off one after the other. You can change that to 10, 20, 19. Okay. All right, so that is basically, how you work with Vuex, and of course work with, the mutations, right? So we're basically working with the mutations right here, increment and subtract. For the action, which is the network request. So when I make this network request, the idea is it's probably going to call, it's going to call the network request right here, with the context, and the results will be stored in here. I'll also go ahead and console.log results. So then this context.commit would, call the mutation, and the mutation would basically, call the state.data while passing the value you get from, the result.data, which is our payload, into data. Okay, so this would be passed into data, right? Because it will come in here as the payload, which means data that was once null would then contain the, the JSON data that we're expecting. So let's go ahead and make the network request. Okay, so this is not looking very good, but as you can see, we have the network request right here. This is data, 200 items. It's an array of objects. And yeah, so this is our to-do items, which of course you can decide to, play around. I see we still have little time. So yeah, let's just do some, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do? Okay, so for the data that we're bringing in, for now, we're just dumping the whole thing here. But rather, I am simply going to say v4 to do in to do's. We have the bind key there, so pass that to the index. We're simply going to pick some items such as to do.user ID, looking at what we have here, user ID, title, and completed. Okay, so this would actually be like this. Okay, title and completed. Right, let's see what it looks like. If I call this now, okay, so I think this actually crashed. So let's verify what happened. Let's go to console. Okay, so it says to do's was assessed. Oh yeah, definitely. Whenever I use to do, I'm just referring to do's. Meanwhile, we're working with data, so I think that was wrong. It has to be data, not to do's. Let's try that again. So we're able to fetch the item here, but we are not able to present the item. So I need to figure out why we cannot present the item. So yeah, I think that's to be to do first for index. Correct. Okay. So now it's to do first before index. And one more thing. One more thing. Let's see. Yes. So I'm going to simply have a div class, and I'll just call this to do. That makes sense. And this would be h2, h2. All right. So this is what I have. I probably don't need this here. So let's just switch things up a little bit. Now this is what coding in real time looks like. So hope hope you're enjoying it. Okay, so one more thing. I think I'll bring this back. I want to have a class for to do, and I just want to say display flex. Yeah, so justify content flex stats. So we have okay, and flex wrap. Okay, okay. I think I would prefer to just say right direction, and I want to separate this item. So I think I am pretty much doing things the wrong way, because what I'm expected to have is kind of like a to-do wrapper, flex. Can I paste that? X, Control V. So yeah, so I want this for the to-do wrapper, which I think is what I should have, in here. Okay, so that the to-do itself can simply be a grid, and center and border. Okay, so let's go ahead and set a flex basis, 300 px, if that works. It doesn't. Okay, so to do wrapper and to do. So we have, oh yeah, mistake. Ah. Um, so what exactly does it look like we're missing here? I can simply figure it out. How to do it, 100%. Oh, I already have that there. Okay, so I have my to-do wrapper as a flex, justify content center, flex wrap, wrap, and I have a to-do item. So something is definitely not right. So I basically wanted to have this grid, this grid look. Come on, to-do wrapper. Okay, so I have the to-do wrapper, and then I have the to-do. What exactly is wrong? So let me just quickly do some inspecting here. So I'm going to inspect the elements Aha, okay. So I think there are probably some items. Okay, so the items are fine. The problem is my code. Okay, so it seems like every single item, the to-do wrapper is not, the flex is not working as we expected it to work. So right now we have, oh, gotcha. What's the problem? That was the problem. So if the flex item, the to-do items was actually, meant to replicate itself, which means you don't need one of these items right here, because it has to look something like this. Yes, exactly. And yeah, that was the problem. Okay, so I think that is exactly what we want to have. So we just have like this grid of to do items with the user ID, the to do item itself, and of course if it was completed or not, which is false and true. So what we have been able to do, we have been able to make a network request. We called an API. We fetch the data, and we were able to present the data using, of course, by calling it through the map action. Right, it's a Vuex action, and we're able to pass it into the mutation and then render it in here as our data, on the DOM. And we can also perform the increment and the decrement, so just like that. So let me quickly take a look at, yeah, I'll take some of your questions if you have any, right? So if we have questions, please go ahead and send in your questions. Amaka, please, I think that is what I would love to share. If you want to get the code base, please let me know as well, and I would share the code base with you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm here, Mav.
Okay, so I don't know if we have any questions.
We don't have any questions. Nobody has dropped any questions.
Okay, so I believe we probably understand this, but if you have any questions, just go ahead and raise them now so I can take them. We just have 10 more minutes to go.
Yeah. So, guys, if you have any question, please go ahead and drop your questions so that Mr. Mav can take them. And also, if you want the code base, you can indicate or do well to drop a message in your Discord server so that you get that code base. So, wait for a minute. If there are no questions by 12:51, we can call this a wrap and see you in the evening.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mav, for this session.
All right. So I am sure I shared the website earlier for Vuex, right? So we have it right here. So this is the Vuex web page. You can visit this web page. I would also share this with you on Discord if you request for the code base or you request for some of these links. Let me know on Discord and I will share that with you. And I hope you had fun. You can also come back and watch this video later and just go through what I did. If you have any questions or you're confused about something, feel free to reach out to me. When we talk about Piana, I would also show you an example on how to use it. Thank you very much, and do have a wonderful day. Bye.
All right, bye, Mav. So, do have a beautiful day, everyone. See you in the evening. Bye, guys.